Good evening. Welcome to the Town Administrator's Report. I'm David Watts Jr., and with me is our Town Administrator, Steve Mayo. Steve, welcome.
Welcome, David. Welcome to you too. And welcome to our excellent Police Chief, Steve Scory.
Thanks for having me.
And this is a special edition of Town Administrator Report to talk about the Public Safety Building, which will be on the town meeting agenda when town meeting happens.
Yes, this is our first kind of rendition around town meeting that will happen sometime in June. Currently June 8th. It may get moved out a week or so, depending upon guidance from the state and what's happening, and we'll have that answer in the next week. But in any event, Article 5 at this town meeting is the public safety building and the very, very, very needed upgrade that needs to happen there. If anything we've learned, I think, during this pandemic is that how important it is to make sure that our public safety officers, whether they be in health, fire, and police, have the ability and the tools to service the community. And for the past few years, as the face of public safety and particularly police work has changed, we frankly struggled with a building that does not really promote what we need to do with 21st century policing. So long history. We don't need to go through it today, but after over a year of meeting with people from the community, from the police department, from a lot of the social groups that utilize police services, we've come up with a plan that is a little bit changed, but a lot of the same items that we presented a few years ago or a couple of years ago are in it. And I think it's very important that we take this and move forward. This is the most and perhaps the only cost-effective way of helping our police department provide the best they can coming up. So in any event, this is part of that whole process. We will also be hopefully having more information. We can't do tours right now because of the COVID-19 epidemic, but we're hoping to have at least another forum, a type of forum where people can actually interact and ask questions, and we can show these things. But and on our town website, a lot of this information is here, including facts and what have you. But in any event, we wanted to get this out in front of the public as quickly as we can. So with a very long-winded introduction, I can turn that over to the chief right now, if that's okay with you, Dave.
Yeah, go ahead, Chief, please.
No, thank you. So we're working out of a police station that was built in 1950. And in 2003, the building got a facelift when the public safety building project took place. And that building project was 90% fire, 10% police. The fire station was completely rebuilt. Our side of the building, it basically got a facelift. Here we are, 2020, and the bottom line is we're out of space and the building doesn't meet our needs anymore. Policing's completely changed from when the building was built in 1950, and it's changed significantly since 2003 when it got the facelift. In 2003, we didn't have any female officers. Now we have 4 female officers. So we have locker room issues. We have a mental health clinician. We have a family services officer. Basically, the services that we provide to the community today are much different than they were in 1950 and much different than they were in 2003. We need a building that works for us, works for our officers, and we need space to do that from.
And you have a presentation that you've put together that's already been shown at where? Town Council?
It was shown at Town Council on March 9th. That's correct.
So let's get into the details of that, because although we've already done 2 documentaries and a panel discussion on the building through WCAT, people may not know some of the details, especially that have developed since those were produced.
Sure. Yeah, if we could bring that up, that would be great.
Okay. There we go.
Look at that.
Excellent. So this was prepared for Town Council and was presented on March 9th. If we can move to the next slide. So there was a public safety building reassessment committee that evaluated the building, what our options were, and that was made up of 16 members. There were members of town council, our town administrator, representatives from both fire and police, a representative from the Wakefield Alliance Against Violence, representatives from the Permanent Building Committee. We had some public members at large, the Emergency Management Director, the DPW Director, and members of the Finance Committee. We move on. So what we're looking at here is in the top left is what the building looked like in 1950. And in 1950, that police station was built to house 34 police officers and 1 civilian. And what we see in the bottom right is what that building looks like now. And you'll see that basically the only change is the roof line. And that space created above that top floor is non-usable space. So essentially we gained no space with the construction in 2003. And here we are in 2020. We have 47 officers. We have 1 support staff. We have a mental health clinician, 1 recovery coach, a respond advocate, and we have 2 parking enforcement officers. We can move to the next slide. So when we had the public safety building renovation in 2003, the existing structure was used for the police side of the building. And like I said, the fire side was built completely new. So our side of the building is now 70 years old, and the fire side is a 17-year-old building, and that side extends out to the sidewalk. They gained a good amount of usable space by having that new structure built all the way out to the sidewalk at the on Union Street. And you'll see in the bottom left where our building doesn't meet the sidewalk. There's the difference right there, and that is a significant amount of space. If we can move to the next slide. So what this shows is the backside of the police station, and this was added in 2003. And the only usable space that we gained here was the detention center, and what you see is the 2 garage doors. That's the Sally Port, where we house our prisoner van and where cruisers bring prisoners into the building. The rest of that structure that you see that was added on, that was used for utility rooms. And if we can move on to the next slide, you will see that those rooms include the generator, the electric room, the boiler room, 911, IT, and you'll see that there's some issues there. We have some water leaks in the roof in several of the areas, and these are critical areas. We have a lot of electronic equipment there, which if any of it got wet would be significantly detrimental to our operations here. We've also had a lot of cooling issues in those rooms. They weren't properly ventilated when the building was built. There's some aftermarket air conditioning that was added to try and cool those down. We have had some overheating issues there, and there's been some damage to equipment in the past. If we can move on. So in June of 2017, there was an independent study done on the public safety building, and this study found that the building is undersized. The front lobby area has accessibility and safety issues. The water leaks create critical risk in the 911 system and IT equipment. There are environmental issues. The evidence storage room is not located in a proper area and is too small. And the overall layout is not conducive to best practices. An analysis determined that the most efficient and cost-effective means to add usable space would be through structurally independent horizontal additions adjacent to the existing building. Next slide. What you see here is the existing lobby. Now, the lobby is not user-friendly by any means. We've had to put in many signs to guide people through the lobby to help them find what they're looking for. The only office that we have in the lobby is police records, and that's only staffed during the week from Monday to Friday between the hours of 8 and 3. The rest of the time, there is nobody in the lobby to see people face to face. Police records officers are constantly directing walk-ins to the fire department. If we can move to the next slide. And what you see here is a telephone that's on the wall for people to contact dispatch when they walk into the lobby of the police station. Dispatch is on the 2nd floor. The officers that are on the 2nd floor cannot leave dispatch. They have to stay there to answer 911, the radio, and the police telephones. So if somebody in the lobby needs assistance, they pick up that phone, they talk to an officer in dispatch, the officer will call in another officer off the street to help the person in the lobby. And it's a critical time that's lost there. And there's some people that are in need of immediate assistance. And we just, as we're set up right now, sometimes we can't provide that. Next slide. So this is what's called the first level, which is actually the basement of the old building. The locker rooms have some unusable lockers due to support columns, and both the male and female locker rooms are nearly at capacity. Like I said, when the building was renovated in 2003, we didn't have any female officers, but there was a female officer's locker room that was built. It was built too small, and it's nearly at capacity now. We will be hiring more female officers in the future, so that will be an issue with space. We had to convert 2 small storage rooms in the basement that were originally used for an armory workroom and arms storage into offices. And the picture you see on your left, on the far left, is our clinician's office. Again, it's a converted closet. It's only 5 feet wide, has no windows. The picture in the middle is where Officer Randall works. That's the family services officer. That was a converted storage area. Again, only 5 feet wide, no windows. And if we can move on to the next slide, please. Canine equipment and gear is stored in the water services room in the garage. That's the picture you see on the far right. And the roll call room is far too small for daily briefings, and we can't hold any training there. It would be great to have a roll call room that's the proper size that we can hold training classes, but what we have now just doesn't support that. Moving on. So there are significant storage issues throughout the building. We don't have any space. We've converted storage areas into offices. The items that were in those storage areas had to be moved to other places. So what you see in the top left picture is our police bicycles. Those are now stored under a stairwell. There used to be a bicycle storage area off the Sally Port. The bicycles got displaced once we had to move all the armor's equipment to that room. What you see in the top right is a storage area in the parking garage. It's tough to store items there, especially anything of value, because of the amount of dust and dirt that gets into those items, and it ruins anything that's stored in there. Anything that is stored in that area, we have to wrap in plastic to keep it from being ruined. Some items have been put up on blocks due to water damage, and we really can't store any equipment off-site because we'd have no access to it. And most of our equipment is stuff that we need immediate access to. So storing items off-site, really not an option. Next slide. What you see here is our prisoner bay, the Sally Port, and the top 2 photos show the prisoner van. And the van is backed up all the way to the wall, and you'll see that the door basically comes down to the front of the van. So the van has 2 compartments on it. There's a side access compartment and then one in the back. So if we have to transport multiple prisoners with this van, we have to put them in separate compartments. It's easy enough to put somebody in the side compartment, but to put somebody in the back, you have to actually open the door, the garage door, pull the van forward to open the back door. That becomes a significant security concern. We should not be opening any doors to load prisoners into vehicles, but we really don't have an option here. We've looked into a smaller prisoner van. They don't make them, so that wasn't an option. So we really need the space here to be able to safely load and unload prisoners from the vehicle. Next slide. So what you see on the bottom right is the other bay in the Sally Port. You'll see there's a support column right in front of the door to the detention area. So what happens here is that area is not large enough for a cruiser to pull all the way in. So the cruiser has to pull in at an angle to get the secure door to shut. And then it becomes an issue of maneuvering the prisoner around the door, the car. It's very tight for space. And then the bottom left picture is what used to be the bicycle storage room, and that's now the armor's room, where the armor stores all of his equipment. So moving on. Here we see the proposed addition. The top picture is what the front would look like, and you'll see that the police side of the building is now bumped all the way out to the sidewalk, and you'll see that the vestibule area has been reconfigured. And the bottom shows that the back of the building where the sally port has been extended out to make room for the prisoner van to properly fit. The new entry to the building would have an intuitive flow for foot traffic and citizens to access both police and fire representatives. Moving on. Next slide, please. So what we see here is the first floor plans to the reconfigured building. So where you see the red arrow is the vestibule. That's where you would enter the lobby of the building. Records will be on your left. Dispatch would be straight ahead. And this is great for anybody looking for help with the police. Here we have records you can access if you need records from the police. The window is right there. And there's always a police officer in the lobby and dispatch 24 hours a day. So for emergency situations, it's great. And for accessibility, it's phenomenal. It really works out well. The fire officers are on the right. It's basically one-stop shopping for anybody that needs assistance. Any additional areas, what we looked at was how do we create additional space, future space, how could we grow into this building in the future? So any additional space is highlighted in the light blue color with the yellow border around it. And you'll see in dispatch, there's an additional workstation. In the past, when we've had large incidents, or say the 4th of July, we create a third dispatch station. It's kind of makeshift right now, but with a dedicated third workspace, it really works out for us. Records would have an additional workspace. I can see where the demand for records will grow in the future with the Public Information Act. We'll get a constant demand for records. Locker space is crucial here. What used to be the female locker room would become a future locker room, and there would be a new women's locker room, which would be much bigger. And the future locker room is just an overflow. Whichever would fill up first, whether it's a men's or women's locker room, they could have that additional space. Importantly, what you see in the bottom of the screen, where it says general evidence, is that this new evidence room more than doubles the size of what we have available to us now. Our evidence room is currently full. There's very little space available. And what's required of us is to store seized weapons, general evidence, and drugs separately. And this, by more than doubling the space for general evidence, it gives us enough space that there'll be time for turnover. There's some evidence that we keep forever, evidence from major crimes we keep forever, but anything else can be disposed of after a certain amount of time, after all appeals are exhausted. And we need time to do that, but by having the more space, it's allowable. We need a separate room for any drug evidence. And an issue that we have right now is that our current drug storage room is not properly ventilated. And with this new drug storage room, it would be properly ventilated. There's issues with the seizure of drugs. You have some types of drugs can get moldy, and there's others that are in powdered form that become airborne issues. So any drug storage room needs a ventilation system that changes the air in the room 10 to 12 times per hour. Currently, we don't have that, and this new room would, and it'll be much more safer, environmentally friendly for the building. So if we can move on to the next screen. What you see here is the second floor of the building. If you look at the top where the green arrows are, you'll see that that's the sally port, and that area has been extended out, like I said, to create more space for vehicles. We've also created some more storage space there. On the right-hand side, you see 2 storage closets. One of those is a converted holding cell that will be converted into a storage closet. So we have more storage space up there. When you look at the bottom of the screen, what you see there is the front of the building. And what we've done is we've moved patrol operations, detectives operations, and our clinical services operations all to the same floor. Everybody works hand in hand, and it's important to have all those people in an area where they can quickly access each other. So we have a much bigger roll call room, which provides an area for us to do some training. You'll see that we have our family services officer, our clinician, and then we have a future workspace under family services. And that could be for anything from another officer assigned to family services, or another mental health clinician, or a recovery coach, whoever we might have to hire, or whoever we might need to work with us. In detectives, you see 2 future workstations there, in addition to what we already have. So there's significant growth potential there for both detectives and family services. We move to the next slide, please. And this is the third floor of the building. Here we've moved the command staff and our supervisors to the same floor. You see the sergeant's office where each sergeant would have adequate storage for records. Right now, they share record file cabinets in the dispatch room, which is really not the way it should be. They should have their own office where their files are kept. Gives them adequate workspace. Each of our sergeants has independent responsibilities away from dispatch, so they need areas where they can work and store items. You see a number of future offices. These spaces could either be used as an office, they could be used for storage. I'm sure there's some services that we'll be providing in the future that we're not even aware of yet. And that's where these rooms become important, because if we have a responsibility that we have to meet and it requires space, we can move into these areas. You'll see that there's a future office for maybe another lieutenant if we needed to have one. And there's also additional work area in the administrator's office. It's with the increased workload that our administrative assistant has, it's always possible that there'll be another one in the future or some help there. So there's more than enough adequate space created for now and in the future, and this plan really meets our needs. If we could move on, please. So here are the project benefits. Dispatch would move to the lobby along with the records division to make the public safety building more user-friendly for our customers. There would be immediate access to an officer in an emergency. Privacy concerns for sensitive cases would be alleviated. When we look at the first floor plan, there's an interview room off the lobby, and it's kind of tucked out of the way, and it's important because what we need to understand is that there are a lot of sensitive issues that we deal with for people that come in the lobby, and they're conversations that not everybody needs to hear. There are also a number of custody exchanges of children that happen in the lobby, and to have an area where that can be done privately is very important to people. People treasure their privacy, and they don't need some of their issues aired for everybody in the lobby. So having that room is really a benefit to us. The layout of the building would be reconfigured to better serve the officers and utilize best practices. Prisoner security in the Sally Port would be upgraded, and system upgrades would protect our critical infrastructure. Moving on. It allows for growth in the future. The current total area of the police side of the public safety building, including the shared space, such as the garage, lobby, and community room, is 20,529 square feet. The lobby and community room total 1,797 square feet, and the garage totals 8,730 square feet. Next slide, please. 10,002 square feet of operational space is left for the police department, 1/4 of which is dedicated to the detention area. This proposed project would increase the amount of operational space by 40%. Increase in operational space meets our current needs and will allow for future growth. It will allow our police force to grow with the community and create space for additional support personnel. Next slide. So what we found here was an excerpt from the 1949 Wakefield Annual Town Report. It talks about the police building, police station building, when it was built. And there's a quote here that says, "This building should be large enough to house the department for the next 20 or 25 years. Well, here we are 70 years later. We've outgrown the building, and we are definitely out of space. So it may have lasted for 20 or 25 years, but it's no longer serving our needs. Next slide, please. And that concludes the presentation, and thank you for your time.
Thank you, Chief. And just to remind our voters and those who will be at town meeting, this is the second go round on this building project. How has, and Steve, I'll ask this question of you, but how has this changed since we originally voted for it last year?
Well, of course, the construction estimates have increased. Cost of steel went up. So we're looking at a $9.6 million project, which, if memory serves me correct, was around an $8 million project almost 2 years ago now. So that, that's the cost of inflation and what have you. Not to be sound like I'm taking advantage of a horrible situation, but we're hopeful that given the current economic state that's going out there, maybe we can get this money back down to that $8 million when we go out to bid. So there is a light there. But I do want to point out that, if I may, that the reassessment committee looked at a lot of different alternatives, trying to answer a lot of questions. Why not build a whole new police station standalone somewhere? Okay. Well, first of all, we don't really have an available site of land that we own as a town. We'd have to buy land. Okay. But for a new alternative location, when you add in all the infrastructure and everything, probably between 25 and $34 million. That's, 3.5 to 4 times as much as what we have in this proposal. Why not raise and rebuild on the current site? That would be about $12+ million. So, for $9.6 million to increase our usable space by almost half, 40%, and to allow for 60 police officers in the future, it to me is really, really a very, very good, if not excellent plan. Chief did a great job of laying out all of the issues that we have to consider, from chain of custody on evidence, which is solely important. We can't just put the site in a store, put our evidence in a storage place somewhere and pray for the best. Our town could be wiped out pretty quickly on a if we had shown that there was an issue there. But really, the services that the people deserve, the lobby, which was never correct. Let's just call a spade a spade. It was not correct in the beginning. From area of dispatch that's extra, from the groups that we have coming in. I'm not saying that they're new problems, because there were always problems with domestic violence and people that need a little bit more mental health services. But now we as a society are really dealing with it. And you need to have safe places for these people when they come in. Family officer. You have a family officer in a little shoebox, downstairs that is keeping things for kids stuck in between her shelving for when the kids come in when there's a family crisis. That's not what we're about. So I think this is an excellent plan. I applaud the chief and his staff. I applaud the people that sat through a good year of meetings on the reassessment committee, and we looked at everything, believe me, from every aspect of this. And we came back that with some tweaks, this is still the best plan that we have. You know what? Would we love to build a whole new building somewhere? Absolutely. But we don't have $35 million plus the cost of land to do that. So for our money, for the bang for a buck, and to service this community for a long time in the future, this is a great plan. The other part of that is, where I'm the finance guy, this will all be handled within our current bond portfolio. I've worked very closely with bond counsel. It's a good time to borrow, actually, today, because rates are low. There's no debt exclusion needed. We have items falling off. By the time we pay for this, the existing public safety building will be gone. Woodville School will be gone. Senior Center will be gone is the other one. So we're able to match this out, actually keep our bond payments steady where we are now, and get a new police station. Think of it as you had a second mortgage on your house, cost you $200 a month, right? And with that second mortgage, you built a new family room. And that's all paid off, okay? It's all paid off. And now you can spend $200 a month and redo your kitchen. Your money out is the same, and you're increasing your value and your equity and everything in your home. We're increasing our equity in our town, our quality of life, our quality of policemanship, at least from a building standpoint. To me, it's even more compelling now than it was 2 years ago. Let me say that.
Well, and the other, a couple of other things to think about. There have been some voices who have said, well, we should just build a new one elsewhere. But where the police department is now is as central as it's going to get, which means that police officers can get from the building to anywhere in town in about the same amount of time. One of the sites that was suggested for the new building would have benefited those of us in Greenwood, but wouldn't have benefited people in, say, Dolbear or Montrose. You know, is one consideration. The
So,
other
Dave,
thing, yeah, go ahead.
Dave, I can tell you that when the building was being renovated from 2000 to 2003, and we were at the old Montrose School, that was the problem. Exactly what you're talking about is the problem we encountered. We were on the north end of town, and if we had to, say the shift was just beginning and we had to respond down to Greenwood, there's a significant amount of time, especially during rush hour, to be able to get down to Greenwood. So being centrally located is key to response.
Sure, absolutely. You know, the other thing when we were doing the two of the programs on the building back in January, and it wasn't in your presentation, but right now in some of the rooms, specifically the 911 system, the fire suppression is water-based. Water and electronics do not play well together. And that's another reason why this project is so vital. If that system, if that fire suppression system ever went off, 911 would be gone. The central computer system to the building would be gone, and that would affect both, correct me if I'm wrong, police and fire side. You know, so those are things that should never have happened in the first place that now can be resolved within the parameters of this project.
That's correct.
So, Steve, if anyone has any other questions about this project leading up to town meeting, what is their best way to get information?
Well, I'm assuming I'm the Steve, not Steve Scory. He's Chief.
Yes.
Steve. Okay.
Otherwise, I would say chief.
Well, you know, actually, I think they should go to our town website, and there is you can ask a question right there, you know, via email, or you can certainly call me at any time, 246-6390, or email me at smayo@wakefield.ma.us, or you can email Chief Scory. And if we don't know the answer, we'll get to the person on our committee that does. So we're open for questions at any time.
Well, and also all of these email addresses are on the town website, which is wakefield.ma.us.
Right, and on our front page of the website there is the public safety building. It's got a lot of, your question may be answered. If you go through that, there's a few videos that citizens did that really take you into the building, you know, kind of a 3D component. You can see everything. Really some great information there. So please take advantage and look at it.
Right. And also the 3 videos are still available on the WCAT YouTube site and probably also on the Facebook site.
Yep, probably are. Yes.
So any last thoughts, Chief?
Well, it's amazing how policing has changed since I started my career. And when I look at it now, with the level of services that we provide and how proud our people are to provide those services, we need to provide them with a building where they can really shine, where they can do it the best that they can. They do as well as they can now, but they need a building that provides them areas to properly do their job. And we have great people that work here. They work very hard, and they deserve that.
Steve, any last thoughts?
No, I just want to assure the community that this was a very well thought out plan in the first go around. I think it was even fine-tuned. It was fine-tuned even more, but I do believe that this is the best, most cost-effective way that we can help provide quality policing or with the building side. We already have it with the people. Building side, and really position ourselves to move forward for years and years and decades down the road, you know, at a price that is, hey, no one wants to spend any money. But at a price that is reasonable. So I encourage people to ask the questions, look at the website, look at the YouTube videos, and ultimately I'm hoping that you'll get to the same conclusion that we have.
Thank you both.
Thank you.
And thank
Thank
you
you.
out there for watching us. We'll see you next time.
And thanks to WCAT, a great forum to get information out to the community. So thank
Absolutely.
you, David.